Your last name is embarrassing our family. Either change it or don't bother coming to Kevin's wedding." Those words didn't just sting. They severed something I thought was unbreakable. My name is Isabella Rodriguez, and from wherever you're watching this, I need you to hear what happened next. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I was standing in the pristine kitchen of my in-laws' Phoenix mansion, wearing my best navy dress and pearl earrings, trying to blend into their world of country club conversations and charity galas. The Arizona heat had nothing on the ice in Linda Thompson's voice when she delivered that ultimatum. My husband Jake was upstairs getting ready for what was supposed to be a family celebration dinner, completely unaware that his mother had just asked me to erase half of who I was. Rodriguez. That was the name that apparently made her cringe every time she heard it at their tennis club. The name that made Robert, my father-in-law, clear his throat uncomfortably when introducing me to his golf buddies. The name that Kevin's fiancée Ashley whispered about with her sorority sisters, wondering how their family photos would look with that Spanish name mixed in with all the Thompsons. "It's 2024, Isabella," Linda continued, adjusting her designer reading glasses as she scrolled through her phone. "Hyphenated names are so common now. Thompson Rodriguez sounds much more balanced. Or better yet, just Thompson. You're part of our family now." She said it like she was offering me a promotion, not asking me to abandon my heritage. I stood there holding a crystal wine glass that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, watching this woman who had never worked a day in her life tell me how to improve myself. The same woman who had spent 3 years mispronouncing my maiden name, even though I'd corrected her dozens of times. "Rodriguez, not Rodriguez," I'd say gently. She'd nod and do it wrong again the next week. "Mom makes a good point," came Kevin's voice from behind me. Jake's younger brother walked into the kitchen wearing his usual cocky grin and a polo shirt that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. "I mean, think about it, Izzy. When Ashley and I have kids, do you really want them growing up with cousins who have completely different last names? It's confusing for family trees." Family trees. As if names were just decorative branches you could trim whenever they didn't match the landscape you wanted to create. I looked at Kevin, this 28-year-old trust fund baby who had never earned anything in his life, telling me about family values while his biggest accomplishment was getting engaged to his college girlfriend who came from the same social circle. "It's not about confusion," I said quietly, setting down my wine glass with more force than intended. "It's about identity. Rodriguez isn't just a name. It's my father's name, my grandfather's name, my great-grandfather's name. It's the name of people who built businesses with their bare hands and put their children through college working double shifts." Linda's smile tightened like plastic wrap. "Oh, honey, we're not asking you to forget your background. We're just suggesting that moving forward, as part of the Thompson family, you might consider what's best for everyone involved. Jake will inherit significant family assets someday, and these things matter in our social circles." Our social circles. The phrase hit me like a slap. These people who lived in gated communities and measured worth by zip codes and alma maters, who had never wondered if they could afford groceries or if their parents would make rent this month, who had never felt the pride of being the first in their family to graduate college, or the weight of carrying everyone's hopes on their shoulders. I thought about my abuela Rosa, who had come to this country with nothing but determination and a suitcase full of dreams, who had worked in factories and cleaned houses so her children could have better lives, who had taught me that our name wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was something to be honored. Every Rodriguez before me had fought for something, built something, sacrificed something so I could stand in this marble kitchen wearing pearls and speaking perfect English without an accent. "What does Jake think about this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jake, my husband of 2 years, had a talent for avoiding confrontation with his family. He'd nod along with their suggestions, then later tell me privately that I didn't have to do anything I didn't want to do, as if that somehow balanced out his public silence. "Jake wants what's best for your marriage," Robert said, walking into the kitchen with his evening scotch already in hand. "And what's best is harmony, unity. When you married Jake, you became a Thompson. It's time to act like it. Act like it, as if being a Thompson was a performance I needed to perfect. As if the Rodriguez in me was some kind of character flaw that needed correcting." I looked around this kitchen that was bigger than my childhood apartment, at these people who had never worried about anything more serious than which country club to join, and I felt something crack inside my chest. "I need some air," I said, walking toward the back patio before anyone could respond. The Arizona evening was still warm, and their backyard stretched endlessly toward mountains that looked painted against the sunset. Everything about this place was beautiful and perfect and suffocating. I pulled out my phone and did something I rarely did anymore. I called my dad. He answered on the second ring, like he always did. "Mija, how's the fancy dinner going?" His voice carried that gentle teasing tone that made me homesick for Sunday mornings in our small Denver apartment, where the coffee was always too strong and the laughter was always too loud. "Dad," I said, and my voice cracked despite my efforts to sound normal. "Tell me about Great-Grandpa again, the one who started the construction company." There was a pause. My father knew me well enough to recognize when I needed anchoring. "Alejandro Rodriguez came here in 1952 with $12 and a hammer," he said slowly. "Built his first house with his own hands, sold it, and used that money to build two more. By the time he died, Rodriguez Construction had put up half the buildings in East Denver." "Why are you asking, Isabella?" I closed my eyes and let his words wash over me. Alejandro Rodriguez, who had turned $12 into an empire. Who had made the Rodriguez name mean something in a city that didn't always welcome people who looked like us or spoke like us? Who had built a legacy that put me through law school and gave me the tools to sit at tables where people like the Thompsons made decisions? "Just remembering where I come from," I said softly. "Good," Dad replied. "Don't ever forget that. The people who love you for who you are will never ask you to be someone else." After I hung up, I sat on the patio for a long time, watching the stars appear one by one over the desert. When I finally went back inside, the family was gathered in the dining room, and Jake was looking at me with that expression he got when he knew something was wrong, but hoped it would resolve itself without him having to take sides. "Everything." "Okay, sweetheart," he asked as I sat down beside him. "Your family thinks I should change my last name," I said directly, not bothering to soften it. "They think Rodriguez is embarrassing." The table went quiet. Ashley looked uncomfortable. Kevin looked defiant, and Linda looked like I had just announced I was planning to streak through their country club. "Now, that's not exactly what we said," Robert began, but I held up my hand. "It's exactly what you said. You want me to erase my family's name because it doesn't fit your image. You want me to pretend that the Rodriguez part of me doesn't exist, because it makes you uncomfortable at your social events." Jake shifted beside me. "Bella, maybe we could talk about this later." "No, Jake, we're talking about it now. Because your family just asked me to choose between my identity and your brother's wedding, and I need to know where you stand." The silence stretched until Linda cleared her throat. "Isabella, you're being dramatic. It's just a name. People change names all the time. When I married Robert, I became a Thompson. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It's what married women do." "Linda," I said, and my voice was steadier than I felt. "You changed your name from Wilson to Thompson. Both perfectly acceptable white surnames that your country club friends could pronounce without breaking a sweat. You didn't give up your culture, your heritage, or your identity. You just swapped one privileged position for another. Her face flushed red. That's completely different. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've never had to explain who you are or where you come from. You've never had people assume you're less intelligent because of your accent, or less qualified because of your name. You've never walked into a room and felt like you had to prove you belonged there. Kevin leaned forward. Come on, Izzy. Nobody's saying you don't belong. We're just saying that sometimes when you join a family, you make compromises. Compromises, I repeated. Like what compromises have you made, Kevin? What part of yourself have you changed to accommodate me? What social circles have you given up? What aspects of your identity have you set aside for family harmony? He looked genuinely confused, as if the idea of him changing anything had never occurred to him. That's different. I didn't marry into your family. No, you didn't, but I married into yours. And apparently, that means I'm the only one expected to transform myself to fit in. Jake finally spoke up. Bella, they're not wrong about the social aspects. My family does business with a lot of traditional people. Maybe if we just... Jake. I turned to look at my husband, this man I had loved enough to leave Denver for, to build a life with in Arizona, to navigate his family's subtle and not-so-subtle suggestions that I wasn't quite good enough. Are you asking me to change my name? He looked around the table at his family, then back at me. I'm asking you to consider what's best for our future. That was the moment I realized I was completely alone in this room full of people who claimed to love me. Not one of them understood what they were asking. Not one of them cared that they were asking me to cut away a piece of my soul for their comfort. I need to think about this, I said, standing up from the table. I'm going home. Isabella, don't leave angry, Linda called after me. We can discuss this like adults. I turned back at the doorway. Linda, I am discussing this like an adult. I'm the only one who is. Adults don't ask their family members to erase their heritage for social convenience. Adults don't make love conditional on assimilation. I drove home to our suburban Phoenix house in complete silence, past palm trees and strip malls and gated communities that all looked the same. When I got home, I sat in our perfectly decorated living room and stared at our wedding photos on the mantel. There I was in my white dress, beaming next to Jake in his tuxedo, surrounded by his family's satisfied smiles. I looked happy. I looked like I belonged. But I remembered what it had taken to get there. The subtle comments about my family's modest background, the suggestions about which relatives I should and shouldn't invite, the way Linda had insisted on hiring a wedding planner who understood elegant events instead of letting my mother help with the planning like she'd dreamed of doing her whole life. I thought about the engagement party where Kevin had introduced me to his friends as Jake's girlfriend who's super smart. She's actually a lawyer, as if my intelligence was somehow surprising given my last name. I thought about the country club events where I smiled and nodded, while women who had never worked discussed the help and made assumptions about which member of the staff I must be when I walked into rooms before Jake arrived. I had spent 3 years trying to be the perfect Thompson wife. I had learned to play tennis. I had joined the right charity committees. I had smiled through countless dinner parties where I was the only person of color in the room, listening to conversations about those people and their problems, as if poverty and struggle were character flaws rather than circumstances. And now they wanted the final piece. They wanted my name. I walked to my home office and opened my laptop. For the first time in months, I Googled my own family history, something I used to do regularly but had stopped since moving to Phoenix. Rodriguez Construction was still there, still operating in Denver under my cousin Miguel's management. The company my great-grandfather had built with $12 and a hammer now employed over 200 people and had revenues in the millions. I scrolled through news articles about my family's business, about the scholarships they provided for first-generation college students, about the community centers they had helped build in East Denver. I found an article from just last month featuring my father, talking about carrying on his grandfather's legacy of creating opportunities for families like ours. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I Googled Rodriguez family wealth and Rodriguez construction net worth. What I found made me sit back in my chair and stare at the screen. Forbes had listed my family's construction business among the most successful Latino-owned companies in the country. The article estimated the company's value at over $50 million, with my family's personal net worth somewhere in the range of $30 million. There were photos of the buildings we'd constructed, the communities we'd developed, the lives we'd changed. My great-grandfather's $12 had become an empire. And here I was, sitting in Phoenix, being told by people who had inherited their wealth rather than earned it that my family name was something to be ashamed of. I kept reading. There were articles about my Uncle Carlos, who had expanded the business into renewable energy and green construction. About my cousin Sophia, who had used her trust fund to start a nonprofit providing free legal services to immigrant families. About the Rodriguez Foundation, which had donated millions to education and community development programs across the Southwest. The Thompsons had money, sure. Robert's family had owned a chain of car dealerships that they'd sold for a comfortable sum. They lived well, traveled often, and belonged to the right clubs. But the Rodriguez family had built something bigger. We had built something that mattered. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. Tomorrow was Kevin's engagement party, the event I was supposed to attend with my newly hyphenated name, or my complete transformation into a Thompson. The event where I was supposed to smile and pretend that erasing half of who I was had been my idea. But tonight, I had learned something that changed everything. I wasn't the charity case who had married up into the Thompson family. I wasn't the girl from the wrong side of town who should be grateful for their acceptance. I was Isabella Rodriguez, descendant of builders and dreamers, inheritor of a legacy that was worth more than their social approval could ever be. And tomorrow, they were going to find out exactly who they had asked to disappear. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Jake snored softly beside me, completely unaware that his wife was having an identity crisis 3 feet away. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Linda's face when she'd said, "embarrassing," and Kevin's casual dismissal of my heritage. But more than that, I kept thinking about those Forbes articles and what they meant. At 5 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen to make coffee. While it brewed, I called my dad again, knowing he'd be awake. Construction workers start early, and old habits die hard even in retirement. "Mija, you're up early," he said, and I could hear the concern in his voice. "Everything okay?" "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. How much is our family actually worth?" There was a long pause. "Why are you asking?" "Because last night Jake's family told me our name was embarrassing, and I spent hours reading Forbes articles about Rodriguez construction. I found numbers that don't match anything you've ever told me about our family's situation." Another pause, longer this time. "Isabella, sit down." I was already sitting, but I gripped my coffee mug tighter. "Dad, what aren't you telling me? Your great-grandfather didn't just build a construction company, Mija. He built an empire. When he died, he left specific instructions about how the family wealth should be handled. The business income gets reinvested, the family gets comfortable livings, but the real wealth stays in trust until the 4th generation comes of age." My hands started shaking. "What does that mean?" "It means that next month, when you turn 30, you're going to inherit your full share of the Rodriguez family trust. We're talking about $8 million, Isabella, just for you. Your cousins get their shares too, but yours has been growing in investments for 30 years. I set down my coffee cup before I dropped it. $8 million. While I'd been working 60-hour weeks at the law firm, stressing about student loans and mortgage payments, there had been $8 million sitting in an account with my name on it. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "Because you're..." Great-grandfather was very specific about this. He wanted every Rodriguez to understand the value of work before they understood the value of money. He wanted us to earn our places in the world, not inherit them. You've been a lawyer for 5 years, Isabella. You've proven yourself. You've built your own life, your own career, your own identity. That's when you get access to the trust. I thought about all the times I'd worried about money. All the times I'd felt inferior to Jake's family because they could afford things I couldn't. All the times I'd felt like I was lucky to be accepted into their world. Dad, there's more, isn't there? You're not telling me everything. He sighed, deeply. Your great-grandfather was a very smart man, Mija. He didn't just build buildings, he bought land. Lots of land. In places like Austin and Denver and Phoenix, back when it was cheap. The Rodriguez family owns significant real estate in 3 states. The construction company is just the visible part of what we built. How significant? Significant enough that your Uncle Carlos turned down a buyout offer from a major development company last year. They offered $200 million for our Phoenix holdings alone. He said no because the land is worth more to us than the money. I stood up and started pacing around my kitchen. Our Phoenix holdings? Dad, what Phoenix holdings? Isabella, your family owns about 30% of the commercial real estate in North Phoenix, including the land that the Thompson family's country club sits on. I stopped pacing. What did you just say? The Desert Oaks Country Club. We own the land. They lease it from us on a 99-year agreement that comes up for renewal every 10 years. It's been a very profitable relationship. The Desert Oaks Country Club, the place where Linda played tennis every Tuesday and Thursday, the place where Robert conducted business meetings over golf, the place where Kevin had proposed to Ashley on the 18th hole, the place where they'd told me my name was embarrassing. Dad, are you telling me that the Thompson family pays rent to the Rodriguez family? Indirectly, yes. The club management company pays us, and they collect from the members. But yes, technically, every time Robert Thompson pays his membership, fees, some of that money ends up in Rodriguez accounts. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. How long have you known about Jake's family? Since you started dating him. I make it my business to know about anyone my daughter gets serious about. When you told me his last name and where he lived, I did some research. I know exactly who the Thompsons are and what they're worth. I know they're comfortable, but not particularly special. Upper middle class with some inherited money, but nothing compared to what you come from. Why didn't you say anything? Because you seemed happy, because you were building your own life and making your own choices. Because I figured if Jake was a good man, his family's financial situation didn't matter. And because I knew that, eventually, you'd find out the truth about your own family. I put my head in my hands. Dad, they want me to change my name. They think Rodriguez is embarrassing. They think I married up. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. When my father finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Isabella, let me make sure I understand this correctly. The Thompson family wants you to change your name because they think Rodriguez isn't good enough for them? That's exactly what they want. The same Thompson family that pays us rent every month? Apparently, yes. The same Thompson family whose son married into one of the wealthiest Latino families in the Southwest. They don't know that part. But you do now. I do now. My father was quiet for a long moment. Mija, what are you going to do? I looked around my kitchen, at the house Jake and I had bought together, at the life we'd built in Phoenix. I don't know yet, but I'm not changing my name. Good. And Isabella? Yes? Remember what your great-grandfather always said. Money doesn't make you better than anyone else, but it does give you options. You have options now that you didn't have yesterday. After I hung up with my dad, I called in sick to work and spent the day doing research. I started with the Rodriguez family trust documents that had been emailed to me years ago, but which I'd never opened because I'd been told they weren't relevant until I turned 30. Now I read every word. The trust was incredibly detailed and incredibly generous. My great-grandfather had set aside specific amounts for each of his descendants, with the money growing in carefully managed investments for decades. My share wasn't just $8 million. It was $8 million plus whatever returns those investments had generated over the past 30 years. The estimated current value was closer to $12 million. But the trust wasn't just about money. It included shares in the family businesses, ownership stakes in real estate developments, and something I'd never known about, a scholarship fund that had put over 300 first-generation college students through school. The Rodriguez family had been quietly changing lives for decades, and I'd never known the extent of it. I found property records showing that my family owned not just the land under the Desert Oaks Country Club, but also several of the shopping centers where Linda liked to shop, the office building where Robert conducted business, and the apartment complex where Kevin had lived before getting engaged. The Thompsons had been living in a Rodriguez-owned world without even knowing it. Then I did something that felt slightly vindictive, but absolutely necessary. I looked up the Thompson family's actual net worth. What I found was illuminating. Robert's car dealership sale had netted them about $4 million, which they'd invested reasonably well. Their house was worth maybe $800,000. Jake's trust fund was worth about $2 million. Kevin's was smaller. Linda's jewelry collection was probably worth six figures. All told, the Thompson family was worth maybe $7 million. Comfortable, certainly. Well off by most standards, but not even close to the wealth they'd been acting like they had. And definitely not close to the wealth they'd been acting like I didn't have. I thought about all the times they'd made comments about my family's modest background, about how I should be grateful for their acceptance, about how I was lucky to have married into their family, about how my name was something that needed to be fixed. They'd been treating me like I was their charity case, when in reality, I was probably the wealthiest person at their dinner table. I called my cousin Miguel, who ran Rodriguez Construction now. Miguel, I need to ask you something weird. Do you know anything about the Thompson family in Phoenix? The car dealership people? Yeah, we've done some work for them over the years. Why? I'm married into that family. No kidding? Small world. Yeah, we renovated their kitchen a few years back. Nice people, but they kept asking for discounts. Because they thought we should be grateful for the work. Your husband's dad kept explaining to our foreman how important their family was in the community. I closed my eyes. Miguel, did you tell them who you were? I told them I was Miguel Rodriguez, owner of Rodriguez Construction. Don't think they made the connection to you, though. They seemed pretty surprised that a Latino guy owned the company. Kept asking to speak to my supervisor. What did you do? I told them I was the supervisor, and if they had a problem with that, they could find another contractor. They backed down pretty quickly. Why? Is there a problem? I told Miguel about the name situation, about the dinner party, about the things they'd said. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Isabella, do you want me to call them? Explain? Who you are? No, not yet. I have a better idea. That afternoon, I drove to the Desert Oaks Country Club. I'd been there dozens of times as Jake's guest, but I'd never been there as Isabella Rodriguez, member of the family that owned the land it sat on. I parked in the circular drive and walked into the clubhouse like I belonged there, which, it turned out, I did more than most of the members. Good afternoon, Mrs. Thompson, the hostess said with a bright smile. Will you be dining with us? Today? Actually, I'm not Mrs. Thompson today. I'm Isabella Rodriguez. I'd like to speak with the club manager, please. Her smile faltered a little. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought, is there something I can help you with? I need to speak with whoever handles the land lease agreements for the club. The land lease? Ma'am, are you sure you're in the right place? I'm sure. I'm from the Rodriguez family. We own this land. The hostess's eyes widened. Oh. Oh my. Let me get Mr. Harrison for you. Right away. 5 minutes later, I was sitting in the club manager's office, looking at a man who was clearly trying to figure out how to handle this situation. Ms. Rodriguez, what can I do for you today? I wanted to introduce myself properly. I'm Isabella Rodriguez, and I understand my family owns the land this club is built on. Yes, that's correct. We have a long-standing lease agreement with Rodriguez Holdings. Is there a problem? No problem at all. I just wanted to familiarize myself with the property. You see, I'm a member of the 4th generation of the Rodriguez family, and I'll be taking a more active role in our business interests soon. Mr. Harrison looked nervous. Of course. Is there anything specific you'd like to know about our operations here? Actually, I'm curious about the membership. How many members do you have currently? We have about 400 active members. And what's the average membership fee? Our initiation fee is $25,000, and annual dues are $15,000. I did the math in my head. So you're collecting about $6 million a year in membership fees alone, not counting food service and events. That's approximately correct, yes. And how much of that goes to the Rodriguez family as part of the lease agreement? Mr. Harrison looked like he wanted to disappear. I'd have to check the exact terms of the lease, but I believe it's approximately 15% of gross revenues. 15% of $6 million, nearly $1 million a year, just from the membership fees, plus percentages of all the food service, event bookings, and other revenue streams. Mr. Harrison, are you familiar with the Thompson family? They're members here. Yes, of course. Robert Thompson is on our board of directors. Interesting. Well, thank you for your time. I'll be in touch soon about some changes we might want to make to the lease terms when it comes up for renewal. Changes? What kind of changes? I smiled sweetly. Oh, nothing dramatic. Just some updates to reflect current market values. I'm sure the board will understand. I left the club manager looking pale and drove home feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Powerful. Not powerful in a vindictive way, but powerful in the way that comes from understanding your own worth. For 3 years, I'd been apologizing for my existence in Jake's world. I'd been trying to make myself smaller, quieter, more acceptable. I'd been doing it wrong. That evening, Jake came home to find me sitting at our dining room table with a stack of papers spread out in front of me. Hey babe, feeling better? I heard you called in sick today. I did. I had some research to do. He loosened his tie and sat down across from me. Research for a case? Research about my family. Jake looked at the papers spread across the table. What kind of research? The kind where I found out that everything your family thinks they know about me is wrong. I watched his face as I explained about the trust, about the real estate holdings, about the fact that his family had been unknowingly paying rent to my family for years. I watched his expression change from confusion to disbelief to something that looked almost like fear. Isabella, are you serious about this? Dead serious. Your family wants me to change my name because they think Rodriguez is embarrassing. They think I married up. They think I should be grateful for their acceptance. But the truth is, Jake, I'm probably worth more than your entire family combined. He stared at me for a long moment. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I didn't know. Because my family has a tradition of not talking about money until you're old enough to handle it responsibly. Because I thought love was supposed to be about who you are, not what you're worth. But you're telling me now. I'm telling you now because your family has made it clear that they don't love who I am. They love what they think I should become. And I needed you to understand what they're really asking me to give up. Jake ran his hands through his hair. Isabella, this is a lot to process. I know it is. But I need you to understand something, Jake. Tomorrow night is Kevin's engagement party. Your family expects me to show up with a new name, ready to pretend that the Rodriguez part of me doesn't exist. And I need to know if you're going to stand with me or stand with them. Of course I'm going to stand with you. You're my wife. Then prove it. Tomorrow night, when your mother asks me about changing my name, I want you to tell her the truth. I want you to tell her that I'm Isabella Rodriguez, and that's exactly who you married. Jake was quiet for a long time. And if I don't? I looked at him, this man I'd loved enough to move across the country for, and felt something shift in my chest. Then I guess we'll both know where we stand. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I knew what I had to do, and I knew exactly how I was going to do it. I spent the day getting ready for Kevin's engagement party, but not in the way anyone expected. I made phone calls. I arranged meetings. I sent emails. I prepared for a conversation. That was going to change everything. By the time I selected my dress for the party, a stunning red number that my grandmother had given me, saying it made me look like a Rodriguez woman should look, I was ready for whatever came next. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth. And the truth was about to set me free. The morning of Kevin's engagement party, I woke up feeling like a completely different person. Not because I had changed, but because I finally understood who I'd always been. I lay in bed for a moment, listening to Jake's breathing beside me, and realized that for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't anxious about facing his family. I wasn't worried about saying the wrong thing, or wearing the wrong outfit, or somehow embarrassing them with my presence. I was calm, dangerously calm. I slipped out of bed quietly and made my way to the kitchen, where I started a pot of coffee and opened my laptop. Over the past 24 hours, I'd been doing more than just learning about my family's wealth. I'd been strategizing, because knowledge without action is just trivia, and I hadn't spent 5 years as a litigation attorney without learning how to build a case. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Sophia. Dad told me about the name situation. Want me to fly down there and set some people straight? I smiled as I typed back. Not yet, but I might need backup soon. Say the word prima. The whole family's got your back. That was the thing about the Rodriguez family that the Thompsons would never understand. We didn't just marry individuals. We married into a network of people who would move mountains for each other. When you attacked one Rodriguez, you attacked all of us. And we had the resources to respond appropriately. I spent the morning making calls to people I hadn't spoken to in months. My Uncle Carlos, who handled most of the family's business interests. My cousin Miguel, who I asked to compile a list of all the properties and contracts the Rodriguez family had in Phoenix. My Aunt Elena, who worked in public relations and understood how to manage narratives. Isabella, are you planning what I think you're planning? Uncle Carlos asked when I explained the situation. I'm planning to have a conversation with some people who need to understand reality, I said carefully. Nothing more than that. And if they don't respond well to reality, then they'll learn that there are consequences for disrespecting this family. Uncle Carlos chuckled. Your great-grandfather would be proud. He always said the Rodriguez family didn't start fights, but we finished them. By noon, I had a complete picture of exactly how intertwined the Thompson family's life was with Rodriguez family business interests. It was more extensive than I'd initially realized. The country club was just the beginning. The law firm where Jake worked rented space in a Rodriguez-owned building. The grocery store where Linda shopped was in a Rodriguez-owned shopping center. The bank where Robert did his business had financed several Rodriguez construction projects and maintained a very profitable relationship with our family. The Thompsons lived in a Rodriguez world, and they had no idea. I was still processing this information when my phone rang. It was Linda. Isabella, dear, I wanted to call and make sure we're all on the same page for tonight. You've had time to think about our conversation, and I hope you understand that we're only thinking of what's best for the family. I took a deep breath. Linda, I've done a lot of thinking, and I've made some decisions. Wonderful. I knew you'd see reason. So you'll be introducing yourself as Isabella Thompson tonight? No, Linda. I'll be introducing myself as Isabella Rodriguez, just like I always have. There was a pause. Isabella, I thought we discussed this. Kevin's engagement party is very important to our family. We'll have guests from the country club, business associates, people who matter in our community. This isn't the time to be stubborn. Linda, let me ask you something. When you say people who matter in our community, who exactly do you mean? Well, influential people, business leaders, the kind of people who can open doors and create opportunities. People like the Rodriguez family? Another pause, longer this time. I'm not sure what you mean, dear. I mean the Rodriguez family that owns Rodriguez Construction, one of the largest Latino-owned businesses in the Southwest. The Rodriguez family that's been featured in Forbes magazine for our business success and community contributions. The Rodriguez family that owns significant real estate throughout Phoenix, including the land your country club sits on. The silence on the other end of the phone was so complete I thought the call had dropped. Linda, are you still there? Isabella, what are you talking about? I'm talking about my family, Linda. The family whose name you think is embarrassing. The family you want me to erase from my identity. I'm talking about the Rodriguez family that's been quietly funding scholarships, building communities, and creating opportunities for people throughout the Southwest for 4 generations. But your father works in construction. My father owns construction companies, Linda. Multiple companies. My great-grandfather came to this country with $12 and built an empire. My family's net worth is in the tens of millions, and in 3 weeks, when I turn 30, I'll be inheriting my share of that empire. I could hear Linda breathing, but she wasn't speaking. Linda, are you familiar with the concept of old money versus new money? Of course I am. Then you should understand that my family represents something your family has never had. Generational wealth built through innovation and hard work. The Thompsons have some inherited money from a car dealership sale. The Rodriguez family has built from scratch. Wealth that's been growing for 70 years. Isabella, I don't understand why you're telling me this. I'm telling you this because tonight, at Kevin's engagement party, I'm going to be introducing myself to all those influential people you're so worried about. And I'm going to be telling them exactly who I am. Isabella Rodriguez, member of VI, one of the most successful Latino families in the Southwest. And some of those people are going to recognize my name, because my family has been doing business with their families for decades. But we didn't know. No, you didn't know. Because you never bothered to ask. You never bothered to learn anything about my family beyond the surface-level assumptions you made based on my name and my appearance. You decided I was someone you could fix, someone you could improve, someone who should be grateful for your acceptance. Linda's voice was very small when she finally spoke. Isabella, I think there's been a misunderstanding. There's been no misunderstanding, Linda. You told me my name was embarrassing. You told me I needed to change it to fit into your family. You told me this at a country club that sits on land my family owns while wearing jewelry that probably cost less than what my family donates to charity each month. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. And that's exactly what Kevin meant when he talked about family trees and confusion. And that's exactly what Robert meant when he talked about acting like a Thompson. You all meant that I should be grateful to be here, and I should be willing to erase myself to make you comfortable. I could hear Linda starting to cry, but I wasn't finished. Here's what's going to happen tonight, Linda. I'm going to arrive at Kevin's party wearing a dress that belonged to my great-grandmother, the woman who helped build the Rodriguez fortune. I'm going to introduce myself to your guests as Isabella Rodriguez, and I'm going to talk about my family's business interests and community contributions. And if anyone asks about my husband, I'll tell them I'm married to Jake Thompson, who was lucky enough to marry into the Rodriguez family. Isabella, please. And if you or anyone else in your family has a problem with that, you're welcome to discuss it with my Uncle Carlos, who handles our family's business relationships. I'm sure he'd be very interested to hear about how you've been treating his niece. I hung up the phone and sat back in my chair, my heart racing. I'd never spoken to Linda like that before. I'd never spoken to anyone like that before, but it felt right. It felt like finally standing up straight after years of making myself smaller. My phone immediately started ringing again, but I didn't answer. Instead, I called my Uncle Carlos. Back. Uncle Carlos, I may have just declared war on my in-laws. What did you do, mija? I told him about the conversation with Linda, about what I'd said and how I'd said it. Isabella, are you sure you want to handle it this way? I'm sure, but I want to make sure I have backup if things get ugly. You always have backup, but let me ask you something. What's your end game here? Are you trying to save your marriage? Or end it? I was quiet for a long moment. I'm trying to save myself. If my marriage survives that, then it was worth saving. If it doesn't, then it wasn't. That's a very mature way to look at it. And very Rodriguez of you. Your great-grandfather would approve. What do you mean? He always said that respect was non-negotiable. That you could be generous, you could be forgiving, you could be flexible on almost everything. But if someone disrespected the family name, if someone tried to make you ashamed of who you were, that's where you drew the line. Is that why he was so successful? Part of it, but mostly he was successful because he understood something that a lot of people don't, that dignity and wealth aren't the same thing, but they support each other. You can't build lasting wealth without dignity, and you can't maintain dignity without being willing to walk away from people who don't respect it. After I hung up with Uncle Carlos, I spent the afternoon getting ready for the party. But not in the way I'd gotten ready for Thompson family events before. Usually I would spend hours trying to pick the perfect outfit, something that would help me blend in, something that wouldn't draw too much attention or make me stand out. I would practice conversations in my head, thinking about safe topics, and avoiding anything that might be controversial. Today, I was getting ready to stand out. The red dress my grandmother had given me was perfect. It was elegant but bold, expensive but not flashy, traditional but confident. It was a dress that said, "I belong here," without saying, "I'm trying to fit in." I paired it with my grandmother's pearls and the gold bracelet my father had given me for law school graduation, the one engraved with Rodriguez in beautiful script. I did my makeup carefully, not to hide behind it, but to highlight my features. I styled my hair in a way that felt authentically me, not in a way that mimicked Linda's country club friends. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I hadn't seen in a long time. Isabella Rodriguez, not Isabella trying to be a Thompson. Jake came home while I was putting on my jewelry. "Wow," he said, stopping in the doorway of our bedroom. "You look incredible." "Thank you. That's the dress from your grandmother, isn't it? The one you wore to your cousin's wedding?" "It is." Jake sat down on the edge of the bed and watched me finish getting ready. "Isabella, my mom called me today." I watched Robert's face as the information sank in. "Isabella, is this true?" "It's true. My great-grandfather started the company in 1952, and we've been growing ever since. We're actually one of the largest Latino-owned business groups in the Southwest." "But you never said anything. You never asked. You assumed you knew everything about my family based on your assumptions about people with names like mine." The conversation was attracting attention from other people in the group. I could see Linda watching nervously from across the room, and Ashley looking confused as she tried to follow what was happening. "Rodriguez Construction," another man said, joining the conversation. "They built the new office complex downtown. Didn't they? The one with the green roof?" They did, I confirmed. Sustainable construction is one of our specialties now. That's a $50 million project, the man said to Robert. Your daughter-in-law's family is serious money, Robert. I could see Robert struggling to process this information. For 3 years, he'd been treating me like I was lucky to be part of his family. Now, he was finding out that his family was connected to one of the most successful business families in Phoenix, and he'd had no idea. Isabella, he said carefully, why didn't you tell us about this before? Because it wasn't relevant. I married Jake because I loved him, not because of what my family was worth or what his family was worth. I thought that's how marriage was supposed to work. But surely you understand that this changes things. Does it, Robert? Does knowing that my family has money change how you feel about me as a person? Does it change whether you think I'm good enough for your son? Robert looked uncomfortable. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? Because 3 days ago you told me that my name was embarrassing. You told me that I needed to change who I was to fit into your family. You told me that I should be grateful for your acceptance. Has any of that changed now that you know my family's net worth? The group around us had gotten very quiet. I could feel people listening, watching, waiting to see how this conversation was going to play out. Isabella, I think there may have been some misunderstandings. There were no misunderstandings, Robert. You were very clear about what you thought of me and my family. The only thing that's changed is what you know about our bank account. I looked around the group of men, all of them successful businessmen who had probably made assumptions about me based on my appearance and my name. Gentlemen, let me ask you something. How many of your wives had to prove their family's financial worth before you accepted them? How many of them were asked to change their names because you found them embarrassing? No one answered. I thought so. It's interesting how respect becomes conditional when you make assumptions about people's backgrounds. I turned back to Robert. I'm going to go find Jake and enjoy the rest of the party. But Robert, I want you to know something. My family didn't build our wealth by demanding that other people change themselves to make us comfortable. We built it by respecting hard work and dignity, regardless of what someone's last name was. As I walked away from the group, I could feel their eyes on me, and I could hear the murmur of conversation starting up behind me. I had just dropped a bomb in the middle of Robert's social circle, and I could tell that the story was going to spread quickly. But I didn't feel guilty about it. I felt free. For the first time in 3 years, I was being completely honest about who I was and where I came from. And if that made people uncomfortable, that was their problem to solve, not mine. The party continued around me, but I could feel the shift in energy. Word was spreading through the country club reception hall like wildfire. I watched as Robert's golf buddies dispersed to find their wives, undoubtedly to share the shocking news that the Thompson family's daughter-in-law was actually from one of Phoenix's wealthiest families. I could see the whispered conversations, starting at different tables, the glances in my direction, the way people were reassessing me with new eyes. It was fascinating to watch how quickly people's behavior changed when they learned about money. Mrs. Patterson, the country club president's wife who had barely acknowledged my existence for 3 years, suddenly appeared at my elbow with a bright smile. Isabella, darling, I just heard the most interesting news about your family. Rodriguez Construction? I had no idea. My husband has been trying to get a meeting with your cousin Miguel for months about a potential project. I smiled politely. Miguel is very selective about his projects. He prioritizes developments that benefit the community. Oh, of course. Community investment is so important. You know, I've been meaning to ask you to join our charity committee. We're always looking for young women with good business sense. The same charity committee that had politely declined my interest 2 years ago when I'd volunteered my legal services. Now, suddenly, I had good business sense worth cultivating. That's very kind of you, Mrs. Patterson, but I'm quite busy with my own family's foundation work these days. Her eyes lit up. The Rodriguez family has a foundation? We do. We focus on educational scholarships and community development. It's been operating for about 15 years now. How wonderful. I'd love to learn more about it. Perhaps we could have lunch sometime soon? Before I could respond, another voice interrupted. It was Carol Whitman, Robert's business partner's wife, someone who had consistently mispronounced my name despite multiple corrections. Isabella, I was just telling my husband about your family's construction business. It's so impressive. You know, we've been thinking about renovating our kitchen, and I was wondering if you could put us in touch with the right people. The same woman who had suggested I might be more comfortable at the children's table during last year's Christmas dinner because the adult conversation was mostly about business. Now she wanted my family connections for her kitchen renovation. I was saved from having to respond by Jake appearing at my side. He looked pale and unsettled. Isabella, can I talk to you for a minute? Privately? I excused myself from the suddenly interested crowd and followed Jake to a quiet corner of the reception hall. What's wrong? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. My dad just pulled me aside. He's upset about what happened over there. With his friends. I'm sure he is. Isabella, he says you embarrassed him. He says there was no need to make a scene. I stared at my husband. I made a scene? Jake, I answered questions about my family honestly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult anyone, I simply told the truth about who I am. But the way you said it. He says you made him look bad in front of his business associates. I made him look bad? Jake, your father has spent 3 years treating me like I was lucky to be in his presence. He asked me to change my name because he thought it was embarrassing. And now that he knows my family has money, suddenly I'm the one who made him look bad? Jake ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd learned meant he was trying to avoid conflict. I'm just saying, maybe you could have handled it differently. How should I have handled it, Jake? Should I have continued to let your family treat me like a charity case? Should I have kept pretending that I was grateful for their acceptance while they asked me to erase my identity? That's not what they were asking. That's exactly what they were asking, and the fact that you can't see that is part of the problem. Before Jake could respond, Linda appeared beside us, looking flustered and anxious. Isabella, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding, and I think we need to clear the air. What kind of misunderstanding, Linda? About your family, about the business, about everything? I had no idea, we had no idea, about your family's situation. What situation would that be? Linda looked around nervously, as if she was afraid someone might overhear. About the money, about the properties, about everything. The money that you thought didn't exist? The family success that you dismissed because you couldn't see past your assumptions about my last name? Isabella, please. You have to understand, we didn't know. If we had known, we never would have suggested. You never would have suggested what, Linda? That I change my name? That I hide my heritage? That I be grateful for your acceptance? We were just trying to help you fit in. Fit in where? Into a world where people are judged by their bank accounts instead of their character? Into a social circle where respect is conditional on net worth? Linda's face was getting red. That's not fair. We accepted you into our family. No, Linda, you tolerated me. There's a difference. You tolerated me because Jake loved me, and because you thought I was harmless. You thought I was someone you could mold into the daughter-in-law you wanted, but you never accepted me as I was. I could see other party guests starting to notice our conversation. Ashley was hovering nearby, looking confused and concerned. Kevin was watching from across the room with a frown. Robert was standing with a group of men but kept glancing in our direction. Linda, let me ask you something. Now that you know about my family's financial situation, do you still think I should change my name? Linda opened and closed her mouth, several times without making a sound. I thought so, because the problem was never really about my name, was it? The problem was that you thought I wasn't good enough for your family. You thought I was beneath you. You thought I should be grateful for your acceptance instead of recognizing that Jake was lucky to marry into the Rodriguez family. That's not true. It's completely true. And you know what the saddest part is? My family's money doesn't change who I am as a person. I'm the same woman I was 3 days ago when you told me my name was embarrassing. The only thing that's changed is your perception of my worth. Linda looked like she was about to cry. Isabella, please. Can't we just start over? Start over? Linda, you spent 3 years trying to change me. You spent 3 years making me feel like I wasn't good enough. You spent 3 years treating me like I should be grateful for scraps of acceptance from your family. And now that you know I don't need your acceptance, you want to start over? We didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You made assumptions about my family based on our name and our appearance, and you never bothered to look deeper. You never asked about my background, my education, my accomplishments, or my family's achievements. You just decided who you thought I was and tried to make me fit that image. By now, our conversation was attracting significant attention. I could see people at nearby tables turning to watch, and I realized that this private family discussion was becoming a public spectacle. But I found that I didn't care. I was tired of protecting the Thompson family's reputation at the expense of my own dignity. Linda, do you want to know what really hurts? It's not that you didn't know about my family's money. It's that knowing about it changes how you treat me. Because that tells me that you never saw me as a person worth respecting. You only see me as a collection of assets and liabilities. That's not true, Linda said, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? When you thought I was just a working-class girl who married your son, you felt comfortable asking me to change my name. Now that you know I'm from a wealthy family, suddenly you're interested in being friends. When you thought I needed your acceptance, you withheld it. Now that you know I don't need it, you're desperate to give it. Ashley approached us cautiously. Is everything okay over here? People are starting to stare. Everything is fine. Ashley, I said calmly. We're just having a conversation about family values. Maybe we should take this somewhere more private, Ashley suggested. Why? Are you embarrassed by our conversation? Are you worried about what people might think? Ashley looked confused. I just thought, you thought it would be better to handle family conflicts behind closed doors, where people can continue to pretend that everything is perfect. But Ashley, some conversations need to happen in public. Some truths need to be spoken where people can hear them. Kevin appeared, at Ashley's side, looking angry. Isabella, what the hell is going on? Why are you causing a scene at our engagement party? I turned to face Kevin, Jake's golden boy brother who had never worked for anything in his life and had always treated me like I was fortunate to be included in family events. I'm not causing a scene, Kevin. I'm having a conversation with your mother about respect and dignity. But I understand that might be unfamiliar concepts in your family. Kevin's face flushed red. You're way out of line. Am I? Kevin? 3 days ago, you told me that my name would be confusing for your future children. You told me I should consider what's best for the family. You treated me like I was someone who needed to be managed and controlled. And now that you know my family is wealthier than yours, how do you feel about those comments? I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. Just like your mother, just like your father, you made assumptions about me based on my appearance and my name. And you felt comfortable treating me badly because you thought I had no other options. The conversation was drawing more and more attention. I could see Robert approaching with several other men, all of them looking concerned about the public nature of our family drama. Isabella, Robert said in a low voice, perhaps we should take this conversation somewhere more private. Why, Robert? Are you worried about what your friends might think? Are you concerned that people might learn how your family has been treating me? I'm concerned about Ashley and Kevin's engagement party. This is their night. You're right. It is their night. And I wouldn't want to ruin it with an uncomfortable conversation about family dynamics. So let me make this very simple for everyone. I looked around at the Thompson family, all of them watching me with various expressions of anxiety, anger, and confusion. I am Isabella Rodriguez. I will always be Isabella Rodriguez. I am proud of my name, my heritage, and my family's achievements. I will not change my name. I will not hide my background, and I will not pretend to be grateful for acceptance that comes with conditions. I turned to Linda. Linda, if you want to have a relationship with me, it needs to be based on respect for who I am, not on what you think I should become. If you can't respect the Rodriguez part of me, then you don't actually respect me at all. I turned to Kevin. Kevin, if you're embarrassed by your sister-in-law's name, then you're embarrassed by your sister-in-law. There's no middle ground. There. Either you accept me as I am, or you don't accept me at all. I turned to Robert. Robert, if you think my family background reflects poorly on your family, then perhaps you should consider what your family's behavior reflects about your values. Finally, I turned to Jake. And Jake, if you're not comfortable with people knowing who you married, then maybe you married the wrong person. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, could sense the whispered conversations that would follow this moment for months to come. But I felt lighter than I had in years. Now, I said, addressing the group, I'm going to go home. Ashley, Kevin, congratulations on your engagement. I hope you'll be very happy together. I turned to walk away, but Jake grabbed my arm. Isabella, wait. Don't leave like this. How should I leave, Jake? Should I apologize for defending myself? Should I pretend that everything is fine? Should I go back to being the Isabella who makes herself smaller so everyone else can be comfortable? I just think we should talk about this. We should have talked about this 3 years ago. We should have talked about it when your mother first made comments about my family. We should have talked about it when your father started treating me like I was an inconvenience. We should have talked about it when Kevin made jokes about my name. But we didn't talk about it, Jake. You avoided the conversations because they made you uncomfortable. I was trying to keep the peace. No, you were trying to keep yourself comfortable. And you let me absorb all the discomfort so you wouldn't have to deal with conflict. Jake looked stricken. That's not true. It's completely true. And you know what? I'm done absorbing other people's discomfort. I'm done making myself smaller so other people can feel bigger. I'm done apologizing for who I am. I looked around at the Thompson family one more time. I hope you all have a lovely evening. And I hope you'll think about what respect actually means. As I walked toward the exit, I could hear the murmur of conversation starting up behind me. I knew that this story would be all over Phoenix society within days. I knew that the Thompson family would be dealing with questions and comments for weeks to come. I knew that this evening would be remembered as the night Isabella Rodriguez finally stood up for herself at the Desert Oaks Country Club. But I also knew that I had finally told the truth about who I was and what I was worth, and that truth was going to change everything. I drove home in my red dress, my grandmother's pearls catching the streetlights as I navigated the familiar roads of Phoenix. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like myself. Not the version of myself that tried to fit into the Thompson family's expectations. Not the version that apologized for taking up space. Not the version that was grateful for conditional acceptance. I felt like Isabella Rodriguez, member of a family that had built something meaningful, married to a man who needed to decide whether he loved me enough to defend me, living in a city where my family's name actually meant something important. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my living room, still wearing my grandmother's dress. My phone was buzzing with text messages, but I ignored them all. I had said what I needed to say, and now it was time to see what came next. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop pretending that everything is fine when it isn't. Sometimes you have to be willing to make people uncomfortable in order to demand the respect you deserve. And sometimes you have to be willing to walk away from people who can't love you for who you actually are. Tonight, I had done all of those things. And whatever happened next, I would face it as Isabella Rodriguez, with my head held high and my dignity intact. The phone kept buzzing. Outside, Phoenix continued its evening rhythm, unaware that one woman had just reclaimed her identity at a country club engagement party. But inside my house, in my red dress and grandmother's pearls, I felt like I had finally come home to myself. And that was worth more than any acceptance the Thompson family could have offered. The morning after Kevin's engagement party, I woke up to 47 missed calls and 83 text messages. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, still wearing my grandmother's pearls from the night before, and read through them one by one. Most were from the Thompson family. Jake had sent 12 messages, ranging from, "We need to talk," to, "I'm coming home," to, "Please don't make any decisions until we can discuss this." Linda had sent a series of increasingly desperate texts, starting with, "I hope you're not too upset," and ending with, "We need to find a way to fix this." Robert had sent one message, "This conversation isn't over." Kevin had sent nothing, but Ashley had sent a long, rambling message about how she hoped I would consider the family's feelings and maybe we could all sit down and work things out. But the messages that surprised me came from people I barely knew. Country club members who had never spoken to me before were suddenly reaching out. Mrs. Patterson had sent 3 messages about lunch plans and charity committee involvement. Carol Whitman wanted to schedule a coffee meeting to discuss mutual business interests. Even people who had been at the party but hadn't spoken to me were somehow finding my number and messaging me about various social invitations and business opportunities. It was remarkable how quickly word had spread, and how quickly people's interest in me had intensified once they learned about my family's wealth. I was still reading messages when my phone rang. It was my father. "Mija, I just got a very interesting call from your Uncle Carlos. He says you caused quite a stir at a party last night. News travels fast in the Rodriguez family. It does when one of our own finally stands up for the family name. Carlos says you handled yourself well." I handled myself honestly. For the first time in 3 years, I told the truth about who I am and where I come from. "Good. Your great-grandfather would be proud." "But Isabella, I have to ask, are you prepared for what comes next?" "What do you mean?" "I mean that you've just announced to Phoenix society that you're a Rodriguez with access to Rodriguez money. You've made yourself a target for every social climber, gold digger, and opportunist in the city. And you've also made yourself a threat to every family that thought they were more important than they actually are." I hadn't thought about it that way, but he was right. By revealing my family's wealth, I had fundamentally changed my position in Phoenix society. I was no longer the grateful daughter-in-law trying to fit in. I was now a player in my own right, someone with resources and connections that people would want to access. What should I do? Be careful who you trust. Be selective about new friendships. And remember that some people will try to use your family's name for their own benefit. Not everyone who wants to be your friend actually wants to be your friend. After I hung up with my dad, I spent the morning thinking about what he'd said. I looked at the messages on my phone with new eyes, recognizing that many of these sudden invitations weren't really about wanting to know me better. They were about wanting to know my family's money better. Around noon, Jake came home. He looked like he hadn't slept, and his face was drawn with stress. "Isabella, we need to talk." "I agree." We sat across from each other at our dining room table, the same table where I'd spread out trust documents just days earlier. It felt like a lifetime ago. "My family is devastated," Jake began. "I'm sure they are. They feel like you ambushed them, like you deliberately withheld information to make them look bad." I stared at my husband, Jake, do you hear yourself right now? What do you mean? You're telling me that your family feels ambushed because I didn't tell them I was wealthy. You're not telling me that they feel bad about how they treated me. You're not telling me that they're sorry for asking me to change my name or for treating me like I was beneath them. You're telling me that they're upset because they didn't know I had money. Jake was quiet for a moment. That's not exactly what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. And that's exactly the problem, Jake. Your family's feelings are hurt because they discovered they were wrong about my social status. They're not hurt because they realize they treated me badly. They're hurt because they're embarrassed about their assumptions. Isabella, you have to understand their perspective. They were trying to help you fit in. No, Jake. They were trying to make me into someone they thought was acceptable. There's a difference. And the fact that you still don't see that difference is why we're having this conversation. Jake ran his hands through his hair. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to choose between you and my family? I want you to understand why that's the wrong question. What's the right question? The right question is, why do you think there should be a choice between supporting your wife and supporting your family? The right question is, why didn't you defend me when your family asked me to erase my identity? The right question is, why are you more concerned with your family's embarrassment than with my dignity? Jake was quiet for a long time. I don't know how to answer that. Then let me help you. Jake, when you marry someone, you're supposed to be their partner. You're supposed to stand with them, defend them, and support them, especially when they're being treated unfairly. For 3 years, I've been trying to fit into your family's expectations, and for 3 years, you've been letting them treat me like I was fortunate to be included. I didn't see it that way. I know you didn't. And that's part of the problem. You didn't see it because it was easier not to see it. It was easier to let me absorb all the discomfort so you wouldn't have to deal with conflict. So what happens now? I looked at Jake, this man I'd loved enough to move across the country for, to build a life with, to defend against my own family's occasional doubts. I thought about our wedding day, about the promises we'd made to each other, about the future we'd planned together. Now you decide who you want to be married to. Do you want to be married to Isabella Rodriguez, the woman who comes from a family of builders and dreamers and won't apologize for her heritage? Or do you want to be married to someone who will change herself to make your family comfortable? I want to be married to you. Then prove it. The next time your mother makes comments about my family, defend me. The next time your father treats me like I'm not good enough, correct him. The next time Kevin makes jokes about my name, shut him down. Be my husband, Jake. Actually be my partner. And if I can't do that, then we'll both know that you married the wrong person. Over the next few weeks, Jake and I began couples counseling. It was difficult, sometimes painful, but necessary. We had to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect, rather than on my willingness to make myself smaller for his family's comfort. The Thompson family, meanwhile, was dealing with their own fallout from the engagement party. The story of my revelation had spread through Phoenix society like wildfire, and they were facing questions and comments from their social circle. Some people were supportive, suggesting that family conflicts happen and would blow over. Others were less kind, questioning how they could have been so wrong about someone they'd known for 3 years. Linda called me several times, wanting to meet for lunch or coffee, claiming she wanted to clear the air and start fresh. I declined each invitation. I wasn't interested in pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. If she wanted to repair our relationship, she needed to start with acknowledging how she'd treated me, not with trying to move past it. Robert's response was more typical of his personality. He sent me a formal letter, written on his business letterhead, suggesting that we needed to discuss the family's future in light of recent revelations. He wanted to meet in his office, as if this were a business negotiation rather than a family relationship. I didn't respond to his letter. Kevin was the most resistant to change. He seemed to take my revelation as a personal insult, as if I had deliberately deceived him. Ashley, caught in the middle, tried to play peacemaker, but her attempts were clumsy and often made things worse. The most interesting response came from the broader Phoenix community. I started receiving invitations to charity events, requests to join boards and committees, and business proposals from people who wanted to partner with the Rodriguez family. It was fascinating to watch how quickly people's perception of me had changed once they knew about my family's wealth. I was selective about which invitations I accepted. I joined the board of a nonprofit that provided legal services to low-income families, something that aligned with my values and my professional skills. I attended a few charity events, but mostly as a way to network and learn about the community, not to establish myself as a social presence. The most meaningful change came in my relationship with my own family. My uncle Carlos invited me to take a more active role in the family's business interests. My cousin Miguel asked me to review some legal documents for a new development project. My aunt Elena suggested I consider joining the Rodriguez Foundation board. For the first time in years, I felt like I was being valued for who I was, rather than what I could do for someone else. My family wasn't asking me to change or apologize or make myself smaller. They were asking me to step into my full potential as a Rodriguez woman. 3 months after the engagement party, Jake and I were in a much better place. Counseling had helped him understand how his avoidance of conflict had hurt me, and it had helped me understand how to communicate my needs more clearly. He started defending me in small ways at first, correcting his mother when she made assumptions about my background, supporting me when I made decisions that his family didn't like. The real test came when Linda suggested that we all take a family vacation together to heal old wounds. Jake's first instinct was to agree, to try to smooth things over and pretend that everything was fine. But he caught himself. "Mom, I don't think that's a good idea right now. Isabella and I need more time to work on our relationship before we can focus on family dynamics." It was a small moment, but it represented a significant shift. Jake was finally prioritizing our marriage over his family's comfort. The Rodriguez family, meanwhile, embraced me in ways I hadn't expected. My uncle Carlos started including me in major business decisions. My cousin Sophia invited me to collaborate on a new legal aid program. My father began talking about succession, planning, and what role I might play in the family's future. For my 30th birthday, the family threw a celebration that was unlike anything the Thompsons had ever organized. It wasn't about impressing anyone or maintaining appearances. It was about celebrating family, heritage, and the continuation of my great-grandfather's legacy. At the party, surrounded by cousins and uncles and aunts who had always known my worth, I realized something profound. The problem had never been that I wasn't good enough for the Thompson family. The problem had been that I had temporarily forgotten I was good enough for anyone. Jake gave a speech at my birthday party that night. He talked about how proud he was to be married to Isabella Rodriguez, how much he'd learned about strength and dignity from watching me stand up for myself, and how grateful he was to be part of a family that valued character over appearances. It was the first time he'd publicly acknowledged that he had married into my family, rather than the other way around. 6 months after the engagement party, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I left the law firm where I'd been working and joined the Rodriguez Foundation as its legal director. The position allowed me to use my legal skills to help families like the one my great-grandfather had come from, while also taking on greater responsibility in the family's business interests. It was scary to leave the security of a traditional legal career, but it was also liberating. For the first time in my professional life, I was working for something I believed in rather than just working to prove myself. The Thompson family's response to my career change was mixed. Linda seemed genuinely impressed that I was taking on such a significant role in the foundation. Robert was clearly calculating the business implications of my new position. Kevin remained distant, but Ashley seemed to finally understand that I wasn't going anywhere, and that she needed to find a way to coexist with me. The most important response came from Jake. He was completely supportive of my decision, even though it meant a significant change in our financial situation and social standing. He had finally learned that supporting me meant supporting my choices, not just supporting the version of me that was convenient for his family. A year after the engagement party, Ashley and Kevin got married. It was a beautiful wedding, and I attended as Isabella Rodriguez, wearing a dress that belonged to my great-grandmother and jewelry that had been in the Rodriguez family for generations. I introduced myself to people as Isabella Rodriguez, talked proudly about my family's business and foundation work, and never once apologized for who I was. Linda's behavior toward me had changed significantly. She no longer made suggestions about how I should dress or speak or act. She asked questions about my work and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. She still wasn't someone I would consider a close friend, but she was finally treating me with respect. Robert's transformation was more gradual, but equally significant. He started asking my opinion about business matters and including me in conversations about family investments. When he introduced me to his business associates, he described me as Jake's wife, Isabella Rodriguez, who works with the Rodriguez Foundation. It was a small change in language, but it represented a major shift in how he saw me. The most meaningful change was in my relationship with Jake. We had learned to communicate better, to support each other more effectively, and to prioritize our marriage over external pressures. He had learned to stand up for me, and I had learned to stand up for myself. But more than that, we had learned to see each other clearly. Jake finally understood that he had married a woman from a family of builders and dreamers, someone who had always been worthy of respect and admiration. I finally understood that I didn't need anyone's permission to be proud of who I was. 2 years after the engagement party, Jake and I were stronger than we'd ever been. We had bought a new house together, one that reflected both of our backgrounds and values. We had found a rhythm in our marriage that was based on mutual respect and honest communication. The Rodriguez family had embraced Jake completely, not because he was wealthy or important, but because he loved me and supported me. My father had taken him under his wing, teaching him about construction and business development. My uncle Carlos had started including him in family business discussions. My cousins treated him like a brother. Jake often said that marrying into the Rodriguez family had taught him more about integrity and hard work than his own family ever had. He had learned that true wealth wasn't just about money, it was about building something meaningful and lasting. As for me, I had learned that self-respect isn't something you can earn from other people. It's something you have to give yourself. I had learned that changing yourself to make others comfortable isn't kindness, it's self-betrayal. I had learned that the right people will love you for who you are, and the wrong people will try to make you into someone else. Most importantly, I had learned that my name, Isabella Rodriguez, wasn't something to apologize for or hide from. It was something to be proud of, something that connected me to generations of people who had built businesses and changed communities and created opportunities for others. I wear my great-grandmother's jewelry to important events now, not because it's expensive, but because it reminds me of where I come from and what I'm capable of. I introduce myself as Isabella Rodriguez in every professional and social setting, not because I'm trying to make a point, but because that's who I am. And when people ask me about my family, I tell them proudly about the construction company that started with $12 and a hammer, about the foundation that has helped hundreds of families, about the legacy of hard work and community service that I'm honored to continue. The country club still sits on Rodriguez family land. The Thompson family still pays their membership fees, which still contribute to Rodriguez family income. But now everyone knows it. And somehow that makes all the difference. I'm not the same woman who sat in Linda's kitchen 3 years ago, trying to figure out how to make myself more acceptable to the Thompson family. I'm not the woman who was willing to change her name to avoid conflict. I'm not the woman who apologized for taking up space in the world. I'm Isabella Rodriguez, and I'm proud of everything that name represents. And if that makes some people uncomfortable, well, that's their problem to solve, not mine. Because the most important lesson I learned from all of this is that your worth isn't determined by other people's recognition of it. Your value isn't conditional on someone else's approval. Your identity isn't something you should have to defend or justify or apologize for. You are who you are, and that's enough. It's more than enough. It's everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.